What's up guys, this is the photographer filmmaker Reike. Today we are looking at two amazing cameras, Sony FX9, Sony FX6. I'm gonna be comparing these two cameras. Let's get started. So I do own both of these cameras. I bought both cameras myself with my own money. I'm not gonna deep dive into all the menu and system. It will make you bored anyway. It's not a scientific review. I'll tell you based on my personal experience in professional use. So before we start, I personally use many digital cinema cameras such as Red Gemini for Chanel event film and skincare brand film. I like the unique image with a little green tint on its sensor and rich midtones. And Ursa Mini Pro for several projects. I'm very familiar with this camera and I'm a big fan of Blackmagic cameras. Ursa Mini Pro has a very cinematic look to it for its price range, so I love this camera. I do own Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K and I use it for my personal film and many more projects. Of course, I've done a bunch of projects with my Sony FX9 as well. And I had a chance to buy a red Komodo 6K, the yellow one, which is a limited edition. Since this is a pre-production model, so you should be chosen by Jared Land, the president of Red Camera, and you should get an email directly from him if you want to buy one. So when I got that email, I really wanted to buy it. It was a beautiful camera, but at the moment, there was no information at all about the camera, so I had to skip it. So what I want to say is that I know what I need for making a cinematic image, which I like. That's why I bought the Sony FX9 here. FX9 is one of my all-time favorite cameras. It has a very cinematic sensor and it's full-frame sensor. It has a wider field of view and shallower depth of field than Super 35 or smaller cameras. And it has built-in electronic ND filter, which is the best in the world, I can say, and the autofocus and everything. So I chose the FX9 over Red Gemini or Arri Alexa. Of course, they are too expensive as well. After a few months after I bought this camera, suddenly the FX6 came out, and it has all the elements of FX9 that I like, but it has different sensor and processor, which is from A7S III. So it is a hybrid baby between the Pro division that made FX9 and the Sony Venice, and the Alpha division dedicated to mirrorless cameras. The FX6 has a physical of FX9 and a brain of A7S III. So what I was worried about was the image quality compared to FX9 here, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Now, look at these cameras right here. And yes, I know I'm being a bit dramatic because FX9 has a bigger lens and cage, and it looks massive, I know that, but if I strip it down, it'll take half an hour, so I wouldn't do that. But you can clearly see the size difference here. When I first took the FX6 out of the box, I was like, what? It is so lightweight and it felt like touching some plastic toy, maybe since I owned FX9, so I was expecting something more heavier. But if you attach the top handle and hand grip, monitor and lens on it, of course it gets heavier, and I'll say it's a perfect weight. Quite stable for handheld shooting, light enough for a running gun or one-man band shooter. Don't get tired for a long time shooting. I'll say it's an ideal weight. Body weight only, FX6 is 890 gram and FX9 is 2 kilogram. When basic accessories attached, FX6 is 2.5 kilogram and FX9 is nearly 5 kilogram. My FX9 is much heavier than 5 kilogram. With the cage, monitor, V-mount battery and all this stuff, I quickly get tired when it's on my shoulder without any support such as easy rig. Of course, FX6 can get heavier as much as you want if you attach sort of things, but I will definitely not do that. I'll tell you the reason at the end of this video. In terms of weight and size, the FX6 definitely wins, and you guys already know it. I put Sony FX6 and 2 lenses and 1 hand gimbal in my backpack and could move very easily. Okay, now let's talk about built-in ND filter and the autofocus. Builtin ND is the best in the world. If you are watching this video, I think you guys already know what this electronic ND is capable of. This is the biggest reason I bought FX9 here. It's so easy to fully open the aperture to achieve cinematic look. And when you set it to the auto mode, for example, it gives us very smooth transition when you are shooting from outdoors to indoors. You can easily implement effects that can be easily seen in the movies. The ND filter is exactly same on both camera. The autofocus is amazing. It is usable for professional projects. Sometimes it's even better than pulling focus manually when the aperture is wide open. I just use the autofocus on every professional project when I use Sony lenses. They're amazing. They're amazing on both cameras. But I hate to say the autofocus is slightly better on FX6, only in under or overexposed situation. And the Sony FX9 officially has a dual base ISO at ISO 800 and ISO 4000. I really love this feature. But the Sony FX6 here, it is strange, but it has unofficially has a dual base ISO as well at ISO 800 and ISO 12800. You don't lose dynamic range, you don't get noise on base ISO setting. You can get tons of more light with 12,800 ISO. It's a huge difference, 4 stops brighter than ISO 800. Quite simply, the FX6 is more than twice as bright as the FX9 when they both set to high base ISO. It is very useful on low light situation. In this scene, in order to test the 12,800 ISO, I set the ISO to 12,800, but the light from the TV and the ambient light from the bedroom upstairs were too bright. So I turned on the ND filter for balancing it out. Now, let's talk about the lens mount. I hate the lens mounting system on FX9. You can never change lenses with one hand. It's really easy to drop and crash your lens if you are not careful enough. So when I change lenses on set, when I use FX9, assistant cameras always help me to do it. If the lens does not fit perfectly, the fastening may be incorrect and the lens may fall to the ground easily. The FX6, on the other hand, can easily change lenses with one hand. It is exactly the same as mirrorless camera. Now the ergonomics. The positions of the buttons are different from those of FX9. It looks like Sony heard feedback from FX9 users. The buttons are now in the right place, so you don't have to move your hands back and forth more. It's more comfortable. Plus, I really wanted to point this out. It's quite strange. They both have a full frame sensor, but FX9 is a bit more tighter. There is a little crop on FX9, even it's set to full frame mode, which means you get a very slight different field of view even though you are using same lenses on both cameras. Combination with gimbal. FX6 is very modular. You can strip it down like this. It's really good for gimbal works. I put FX6 on my good old running ass and it worked great. There are many very narrow spaces in this scene. Especially the stairs going upstairs were very narrow, where the small size of the FX6 and Ronin S shined here. The scene looking down from the upstairs looks very easy, but if the camera was an FX9, the story is different. If we had reproduced the same moving with FX9, we would have needed more resources, more equipment, and manpower. And obviously, there are risks. But with the FX6, I could easily do it myself. So now, finally, in conclusion, what if I say clients would prefer FX9 on set because it looks professional and it's bigger? No, that's not what you want to hear. In terms of image quality, FX9 is better. In my eyes, the FX9 has a richer midtones, a better dynamic range, and a more cinematic, filmic look to it. But FX6 is better for all the rest. Very lightweight and small size, faster to operate, perfect for gimbal operating, slight better autofocus, no need giant submarine look like accessory for raw recording, and very modular, a better ergonomics, easier to switch lenses, you can bake lots into base look. Of course, there are downsides of this camera. the XLR input is on the top handle here. So removing the top handle will cause problems with professional audio pickup, but it is not a big deal for me because I'm using an external recorder. And the build quality is very plasticky, but it is acceptable because it is to reduce the weight. But guys, listen, in the filmmaking world, a bit more cinematic means a lot. That's why people spend a lot of money for Arri Alexa, RED cameras, even though they require more budget, more manpower, and more equipment. If you can't tell the difference, the image quality between these two cameras, you don't need the FX9. This is not your fault, neither is it right or wrong. The FX6 is more suitable camera and is the best camera for you. I definitely can recommend this camera for those who want to buy the FX6, and it's the best choice for running gun shooters. And for those who already have this camera, obviously there must have been a reason you bought this camera, and so is me. If I hadn't had an FX9 here, I would have paid extra $5,000 without hesitation without choosing this camera, FX6, because for me, image quality always comes first. So what I know now is I will not dump one for the other. I will use both camera for the right situation. And I told you I will not rig this up. I will keep this camera light. The small battery inside of FX6 can shoot 178 minutes. It will stay on gimbal. And FX9 here will be my A camera. So if I operate two cameras at the same time, they will give me a lot more creative image that I want. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll share behind the scenes of editorial shoot for Numero Russia in the next video. So if you guys are interested in, stay tuned. I'll see you next episode. Bye bye guys. 아이고 영어로 하느라 죽겠다.